If you've been drumming for any amount of time, it's pretty likely that you've been told once or twice, or maybe 100 times, to stop playing so loud. And yes, drums are known for being a very loud instrument, but they're also capable of having one of the widest dynamic ranges out of all the instruments. For all of my gigging drummers out there that are playing in restaurants or bars or in church venues or smaller areas, you are used to having to control your volume output to sound good within the band. But what I've found in my experience with drumming with tons of different groups in lots of different sizes of venues is that most of the time it's not actually the volume that you're playing, but the balance of what you're playing. My name is Taylor Edwards. I'm a percussionist and music educator here in Washington State. And if you enjoy this video, make sure you like and subscribe. So if you're out there struggling playing with your band and they're telling you that you're playing too loud, or you're playing in certain venues where you notice that you've been getting some comments from some of the audience members that the drums are too loud, I'm going to provide you with some helpful tips and tricks that you can apply to your playing to kind of fool everyone into them thinking that you're playing quieter, when in reality you're not actually adjusting your overall volume. Now, of course, there's going to be those moments where you do need to bring your overall volume way quiet. This is especially true if you play like any jazz trio gigs or any sort of venue where you are providing background music for some sort of occasion. But even when we are decreasing our overall volume output to very quiet, the balance within our playing still needs to sound good. When we turn our overall volume down, we don't want the groove to suffer or the overall sound quality that we're getting to start to sound weird. And this is really what balance has to do with making sure that you sound good at all different volume levels. So within each style of music, there's kind of their own expected sound balance that takes place. For most backbeat-oriented music like rock and funk and pop, your bass drum and your snare drum tend to need to be the loudest things within the mix. In order for the groove to sound great, we need to have that solid backbeat and that relationship between the bass drum and the snare drum. Most drummers are right-handed, and most drummers play on a right-handed setup, so this typically means that your right hand is playing on the hi-hat. And what happens is that since so many people are right-hand dominant, they're playing their right hand way too loud on the hi-hat, and this really throws out the balance of the groove. To add to that, most people's left hands are pretty weak, and so if you're not getting a solid backbeat out of that snare drum, the groove really suffers. Listen to what happens when I play pretty right hand heavy and I don't have enough support from my snare drum or bass drum. Now I'm going to take the same groove, but I'm going to apply the appropriate volume balance that needs to happen between those instruments. Really solid kick sound, solid backbeat on 2 and 4 with the snare drum, and I like to think of the hi-hat as kind of just the glue that ties those two sounds together. So I'm going to decrease the volume on my hi-hat a lot to try to fit within that sound. You can hear that the groove is a lot more balanced, and you can actually hear all three of the parts equally there. And what you're going to find is that it is typically whatever surface your right hand is playing on that is the culprit of a lot of these volume problems. If you're playing on the hi-hat and your left foot isn't pressed down nice and tight to have a crisp, clean hi-hat sound, this can get really out of control in the mix and ruin the groove. Now, there's obviously going to be times where a slushier hi-hat sound does sound appropriate within the mix. Say you're going to a much heavier section of the song. But even there, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not opening up my left foot too much to allow that overall volume of the cymbals to completely wash out the other parts of the groove. This same concept is true on the ride cymbal, especially when we're using the bell for different things. The bell of the ride cymbal naturally cuts through the mix a lot, and so we don't actually have to apply a bunch of extra volume with our stick height in order to get that sound to be present in the mix. I'll oftentimes see people when they go over to the bell of the ride cymbal, they continue to play really heavy with the right hand and it can completely wash out the groove. All I'm going to change is just my stick height every time I hit the bell of the ride cymbal. I'm still using the shoulder of the stick to get a nice full sound. We want good full tone, but we want that volume to be within the balance of the rest of the groove. It really tends to be the cymbals that are the thing that's causing everything to sound too loud. Cymbals can really wash out the sound of the groove, and because of the frequency range that they're set in, it can be really jarring to people's ears. So always be aware of the sound and the tone that you're getting out of your cymbals while you're playing. Now let's head over to a jazz context. We have a different set of balance that we need in order to sound stylistically appropriate within this style of music. So within jazz, the ride cymbal and the hi-hat really lead the way in terms of the volume, and I can't tell you the number of times when I hear a student try to play a swing beat or a jazz groove for the first time. 99% of people end up sounding like this. And I don't blame them at all, because if you go into any sort of, middle school or beginning drum set jazz book, when they write out a jazz swing groove, it typically looks like that. For some reason, they're putting the snare on 2 and 4 still. They have the bass drum included in the sound. And so the student is most likely only doing what they're comfortable with, probably coming from a rock background with their playing. Whenever we play the bass drum in jazz, we want to keep that as the quietest voice within the mix. This is sometimes called feathering the bass drum. And we want to make sure the snare drum, for the most part, is staying underneath the ride cymbal and the hi-hat sound. Now, once again, if I'm playing in a smaller venue, I still want to have this relationship between the instruments be the same, but I'm just going to reduce my overall volume by lowering all of my stick heights. That way the groove is always sounding how it needs to fit the style of the music. So I hope you found this video helpful. Again, just be very mindful of your cymbals and how your right hand is approaching these different surfaces, thinking about the overall balance of your groove to make sure that you are fitting whatever style of music you are playing. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.